Disgraced Prince Harry has emerged from 24 hours of hiding in Birmingham as he drags the British royal family into a new drugs scandal. So here are the images, very carefully released images, shall we say, of Harry just pretending all is okay. And that Charlotte Griffiths, the editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday, who has been completely vindicated by Justice Nicklin in the slam dunk Daily Mail victory over Prince Harry in court, has revealed that on her first meeting,
a disgraced Prince Harry emerged after 24 hours of hiding in Birmingham, dragging the British royal family into a brand new drug scandal. If we look closely at these carefully curated images, the prince is merely pretending that everything is fine. Meanwhile, journalist Charlotte Griffiths, the editor-at-large for the Mail on Sunday, she was completely vindicated by the High Court in a massive victory against Harry. She recently revealed that during their very first meeting, when he was still third in line to the throne, the prince produced a white pill, placed it directly on her tongue, and said, "Now I know I can trust you." This shocking revelation followed reports from commentators Dan Wooten and Lady Colin Campbell, who noted that the prince seemed to be growing more dependent on legal substances. The hosts prepared to dissect these astonishing revelations about Griffiths, which also included some direct comments about Lady Colin Campbell in a major Daily Mail exposé published that day. But first, they wanted to address his immediate, present situation. Just yesterday, Harry visited Chelsea Hospital alone to meet the pensioners, even though Meghan was supposed to attend. Though it was billed as a major event, not a single official photo emerged. Today in Birmingham, there were absolutely no cameras or real journalists around him. It was obvious that the prince was struggling deeply through his darkest week yet. Lady Colin agreed, pointing out that Harry faced millions of pounds in legal fees. Money he simply lacked. She emphasized that neither he nor Meghan ever had that cash. In fact, she noted how Harry foolishly exposed their entire legal game plan in his tell-all memoir, Spare, when he detailed their early family moves. When Archie was born, they claimed the baby was too young to fly up to Balmoral to visit the Queen. Yet, during that exact same period, they ended up flying the infant much further to Elton John's luxurious villa in the south of France. It was at this private estate that Elton introduced Harry to attorney David Sherborne, who convinced him he had a case. Harry eagerly agreed, boasting that he was going to defend Meghan against the British media at any cost, and went on and on about it. The entire
Well, of course, Dan. He's facing millions of pounds in costs. I mean,
which he doesn't have.
Which he doesn't have, and which he never had. And he and Meghan both calculated, and let's remember, Harry gave away the game plan for this whole con, this operation, this crookery in Spare. Remember, when Archie was born, and Archie was too young for them to accept the Queen's invitation to go up to Balmoral because he couldn't fly that distance.
Strategy was orchestrated by David Sherborne, with the direct help of Elton John and David Furnish. The prince detailed this in his own book, but reality has set in, leaving him with millions of pounds in costs. Even if he had some form of insurance, it would only cover a fraction of those massive bills. The hard truth was that he faced crippling legal expenses alongside the total and absolute ruin of his public reputation. It was gone. The host thoroughly agreed. Lady Colin remarked that Harry was incredibly lucky the judge did not refer him or his legal team to the police for a full criminal investigation. She believed the judge should have done so, claiming this entire scheme was orchestrated by corrupt figures at Byline Times, whom the prince had previously partnered with in a coordinated effort to completely ruin her reputation. The host interjected, "But let's look closer at the sheer irony of this drug scandal. You and I wouldn't even know about it if the prince hadn't dragged Charlotte Griffiths into a highly public courtroom battle." The editor had made her stance clear on the show. She never had any intention of kissing and telling, exposing private messages, or even mentioning the drug incident. But once the prince dragged her to court and tried to ruin her life, she felt forced to release her side of the story. He added that it was an incredibly difficult time for Harry to deny the claims, especially after the judge officially declared Griffiths to be a highly credible and honest witness. The host then read the shocking details directly from the article Griffiths had written. Harry had recently returned from California, where he had been learning to fly helicopter gunships. She was then a 27-year-old trainee journalist working on a gossip column for the Mail on Sunday. According to the table arrangements, she and the prince were seated right next to each other at dinner. And because the prince was likely wary of being introduced to a stranger dressed in H&M, he decided to test her to kickstart their interaction. He pulled a small white pill from his pocket, held it to her face, popped it onto her tongue, and smiled, saying, "Now I know I can trust you." She had suddenly found a white pill shoved boldly into her mouth, but she quickly spit the pill out, discreetly folding it into a nearby napkin a few moments later. While it was likely just paracetamol, she could not be absolutely sure. The uncertainty left her deeply unsettled. As they chatted over champagne, she wondered if a senior royal had just tried to feed her a Class A drug, and if she would keep her wits about her during such a fancy event, complete with professional butlers and catered service. Turning to Lady C, he urged her to stop and consider the truly shocking nature of what Charlotte Griffiths was now revealing. Griffiths was a journalist, though Harry later claimed he had absolutely no idea. Yet everyone at that gathering knew her profession, deliberately seating the young prince right next to her on the table plan. So while Harry maintained that he was entirely in the dark, the host found that defense completely impossible to believe. But even if the prince was telling the truth, he was still offering mysterious substances to a 27-year-old professional woman he had only just met. It looked like a highly bizarre, immediate attempt to initiate her into his personal drug-taking circle and win her over on the spot. It was deeply sordid, revealing a troubling amount about the real character of Prince Harry. Those wanting more bold coverage of the royals and their double standards were urged to subscribe and enable notifications right away. The show promised unfiltered truth, but the host noted the story also revealed a great deal about Charlotte Griffiths. Though she claimed she refused the tablet, he wondered if Lady C questioned that version of events. Lady C agreed entirely, noting that the journalist's refusal of the pill spoke volumes about her. Furthermore, she had kept silent for many years and was now working tirelessly to push the story past their legal department, a point the host thoroughly agreed with. Griffiths claimed the small white pill she was handed must have been simple paracetamol. But paracetamol is never a tiny tablet. Those are typically quite large, meaning anyone who has ever used them would know it could not have been that medication. In addition, she would have known the truth instantly, as genuine paracetamol starts dissolving the very second it touches someone's tongue. Clearly, her explanation simply did not add up. She was clearly being highly discreet just to push the story past the legal team, a tactical move both commentators understood and acknowledged. There was absolutely no doubt that the pill was something far different. Everyone involved, from the journalist to the host and guest, knew it was not paracetamol. Furthermore, the prince was highly unlikely to be carrying around basic pain relievers to share at a party. As the journalist's account continued, the guest urged the host to pause and listen closely. Feeling increasingly tense, the prince joked about needing some cannabis to calm down. Or perhaps he would ask his staff to procure some illicit substances instead. The host jokingly suggested that perhaps a simple Diet Coke might satisfy the prince's dry throat instead. Griffiths went on with her written account, and although the host strongly suspected this highly careful framing was done purely for legal safety, he believed it was only fair to share the entire report with the audience. In her article, she noted that Harry, despite his documented past with recreational drugs in his memoir, seriously claimed he could no longer indulge due to the constant threat of random military tests. While others at the parties used cocaine, the prince reportedly insisted he had switched to using creatine instead. This legal supplement is typically mixed with water by fitness enthusiasts who are looking for a performance boost. Yet the prince reportedly claimed that snorting the powder provided enough energy to keep dancing until morning. The journalist added a warning, urging readers not to experiment with this bizarre method. Over dinner, they also discussed American women. Griffiths noted in her piece how the prince strongly defended American women back then, calling them far more intelligent than people realized, a comment that seemed fascinatingly prophetic given the actual course of his future life. The host asked Lady C for her thoughts, suggesting this behavior might actually be worse. He wanted to offer a completely frank assessment. It seemed highly unsettling if the prince refrained from drugs himself, but actively encouraged the women around him to be impaired on various substances just so he could manage them. However, the guest doubted the journalist meant that the prince had offered her creatine. Indeed, the article explicitly claimed the substance was presented as paracetamol. The guest fully understood the host's underlying argument, which was that the prince seemingly wanted his female companions to be completely intoxicated while he remained relatively sober. The host agreed, stating such behavior was far from gentlemanly. He argued that even if the journalist was telling the exact truth, meaning the prince had avoided illegal substances back then solely because of his strict military service obligations. Even if she was actually telling the truth, Dan argued it was still unacceptable for him to hand out substances to women he had just met, calling it highly unprincely. Lady Colin agreed, claiming it was actually far worse because it proved he was fully aware and in control, even if not entirely sober. Meanwhile, the young women had their own control stripped away by the substances he allegedly forced into their mouths. It painted a picture of deep decadence, though they noted that such behavior was precisely what people expected from Prince Harry. Indeed, Dan pointed out that if anyone else had done this, Lady Colin, they would immediately be branded a creep and deemed entirely untrustworthy. She replied that Harry could easily be labeled both a creep and a jerk. He then brought up the heavy speculation that once surrounded a book by royal biographer Katie Nicholl. Nicholl was the editor for Charlotte Griffiths at the Mail on Sunday back then, and rumors swirled about whether Prince Harry had actually swallowed a live goldfish at his former nanny's wedding. Naturally, that scandalous claim had to be cut from the final draft because the prince denied it. However, Griffiths reported that his friends found it hilarious, recalling a massive fish tank in the dining room of their country home. As they walked past it, a friend joked, "I hope you're not going to swallow another goldfish, Harry." For Dan, this strongly suggested that Harry had lied once again to silence a journalist, adding to what he saw as a growing track record of deception. He listed examples to Lady Colin, from Spare to Netflix and courtrooms. It seemed highly likely that he did swallow the fish, especially since his companions found the whole incident so incredibly amusing. She agreed, noting that his friend's teasing clearly implied he had confessed the bizarre act to them directly. They knew what he had done, which made their warning about not swallowing another one perfectly clear. Dan then shifted focus, mentioning how the prince now claimed to face a massive security threat over his military disclosures. He believed he was a primary target for Islamic extremists after revealing his personal Taliban body count in his memoir. Yet Griffiths detailed a hangover-filled afternoon the very next day, describing how the group eventually gathered after lunch. According to her account, the entire group retired to a home cinema as night fell to watch an action movie that ended with Islamic extremists attempting a violent assault on the White House. It was a scene that deeply affected the young prince. He loudly and mockingly shouted Allahu Akbar to the room while rolling his eyes. Dan remarked that while it might have been a simple throwaway comment, it remained highly intriguing. This stood out especially in the context of his ongoing demands for tight security due to extremist threats. But first, he invited listeners to recall when daily energy felt effortless, powering through tough workouts and sleepless nights with ease. He warned that as the years go by, it can feel like the brain and body simply lose that vibrant spark they once had. But as he explained, this decline is purely biological, not psychological. A younger body naturally produces and constantly replenishes high levels of creatine. Yet, as people cross into their 40s and beyond, this natural output declines, meaning less immediate energy for both muscles and brain function. This is precisely why Qualia Creatine Plus was formulated. As he explained, that standard creatine supplements often fail to deliver real results. The compound must successfully penetrate the cells and activate before the body can truly utilize it. Qualia's formula stands apart by combining two clinically backed forms of creatine alongside key electrolytes. Each ingredient was selected to boost absorption. The formula includes micronized creatine monohydrate in a new form, along with creatine magna power and a precise dose of sea salt to boost absorption where it matters most. The real distinction lies in its unique delivery system. He emphasized that it provides the optimal delivery system, proving that the days of creatine being reserved solely for gym enthusiasts are long gone. Indeed, it is crucial for cognitive health, metabolism, and graceful aging, far beyond simple muscle building. Listeners can visit qualia.com/Dan for 50% off, plus an extra 15% off with code Dan. That is qualialife.com/Dan, using the promo code Dan. He expressed gratitude to the sponsor before steering the conversation back to the main topic. Lady Colin dismissed the remark as mere harmless humor, noting it was the exact sort of dry wit she might employ herself. Dan agreed, pointing out that Harry had fought the Taliban, meaning the comment was not particularly problematic to him. Dan then raised the lingering question of a potential romance between them with Lady Colin. noting his own strong suspicions despite Griffiths denying it in her writing. At some point, while they were all watching it, Harry shuffled over to her beanbag, crawled under the blanket she was sitting under, and wrapped his arm around her. There was nothing particularly romantic about his sweet gesture. Although she wasn't physically attracted to him, she felt slightly uncomfortable. She was dating someone else at the time, and besides, he had already kissed another girl the previous night, someone who had arrived for the weekend with one of his friends. By breakfast, it all seemed like part of the previous night's entertainment, and everyone simply laughed it off. Dan asked Lady Colin Campbell what she made of the situation. Lady Colin observed that, if the two had anything, it was likely just a passing fling. If it truly was a passing fling, especially given everything that had happened since, she would be very foolish to actually acknowledge that anything had ever gone on between them. So, Lady Colin wasn't saying she fully accepted it, or took it with a grain of salt. She preferred to keep an open mind, particularly because of how she read their messages. Dan chimed in, pointing out that his own reading of the messages suggested a romantic connection. Harry had been incredibly flirtatious, calling her Charlotte G-string, and even bringing up their cuddle in those messages. Because Dan prides himself on being fair, he decided to put the question directly to Charlotte just the day before. He wanted to make sure she had a proper opportunity to respond to the claims. He prepared to share her response to get Lady Colin's immediate reaction to it. Dan pointed out that Charlotte was
aware of the nickname Mr. Mischief. Yes, well, that weekend, everyone came out with mad nicknames for each other. We all know what mine was. And I didn't know him that well. So I felt it was a bit over familiar to come up with a nickname. So I came up with Mr. Mischief. It wasn't very good. I have to say, I wish I'd been a bit wittier. But again, this is the first time I'd met the guy, and I'd spent two days and 2 nights with that whole gang. So I got to know them pretty well.
And the thing, Charlotte, he does use the term. I think this is one of the reasons that he has been caught red-handed.
Actually the first to use the nickname Mr. Mischief. It was a private nickname between the two, which Harry later clearly acknowledged. Dan then asked if she believed Harry was indeed fully aware of the title. Charlotte confirmed he was indeed aware of it. She explained that everyone came up with wild nicknames that weekend, hers being common knowledge. Since she did not know him very well yet, she felt it was a bit too intimate to use his real name. So, she came up with Mr. Mischief. She admitted it wasn't a great nickname, and wished she had been wittier. However, it was her very first time meeting him, though she did spend 2 days and nights with his group. So she got to know them quite well. Dan reminded Charlotte that Harry did use the term. Dan believed this was proof of him being caught red-handed. Although Charlotte used it first, Harry replied by questioning how exactly he had earned the title of Mr. Mischief. He insisted he was surely no worse than others. So, Harry was clearly acknowledging that he knew she had called him by that nickname, which Charlotte confirmed to be true. To Charlotte, it was all just harmless banter between a couple of 20-somethings who were simply reminiscing about a wild weekend they had shared. When Dan asked Lady Colin after that whether there was a romance, she scoffed, saying a weekend hookup is hardly a real romantic relationship. It was just a hookup. She wasn't explicitly saying they slept together, but how they acted and kept in touch for a long time afterward proved there was definitely a strong, mutual attraction between them. She might want to deny it now, but she was right there with him, eagerly responding and even provoking him. To her, the only rational reading of the situation was that some level of attraction definitely existed between them. She noted she was worldly enough, reminding Dan that this high society circle was her world. Indeed, she knew all about 20-somethings at aristocratic dinner parties and royal weekend gatherings, testing the waters with each other, knowing it was no big deal if things didn't work out. Whether they actually took things to the next level or not, whether things came to fruition or not, there was a clear attraction from the start. Lady Colin didn't blame her for denying it now. Even if something had occurred, as she needed to protect her dignity, it would look incredibly tacky to admit to a casual roll in the hay, or confess that they had a quick tumble in the hay only for her to find he wasn't very good, or metaphorically complaining that his train arrived far too early at the station when she was used to them running late, and she simply had no desire to unpack before the doors were even open. Charlotte was clearly deeply embarrassed that those private Facebook messages had been leaked to the public. She had absolutely no intention of sharing them herself. For many years, she never once considered kissing and telling on Prince Harry. She only shared those details because he had accused her of phone hacking, an absolutely extraordinary claim. Yet, Charlotte Griffiths did not seem pleased with Lady C in her latest piece for the Daily Mail. The columnist wrote a sharp critique, and the host wanted her reaction. She had claimed to be saddened but not surprised that deep in the social media sewers, where women are routinely objectified, she was bombarded with thousands of messages calling her a harlot and worse. At one point, she even accused Lady Colin Campbell of publicly branding her a drunkard. The sheer bile was sickening, prompting the host to ask if this hatred had surprised the lady. She was indeed surprised, recalling that she never used that term rather. The writer had labeled herself a drunkard. To help clear her name, Lady C simply pointed out that the journalist herself had already made those exact admissions. In her own explanation, she admitted to being drunk and high alongside her companion. She had openly admitted they were intoxicated for the entire weekend and were equally drunk during a subsequent meeting. Since she claimed she was drunk, Lady C saw no reason to call her a drunkard. She only remembered saying the young writer was caught up in a wild, drunken weekend with friends, which was no big deal, and had since cleaned up her life, married, and had children. For the journalist to distort this only proved, once again, her complete lack of accuracy. A friend had called her to bring the matter to her attention, to which Lady C had laughed off the situation as utterly ridiculous. Her friend replied, telling her not to worry because Lady C was the only prominent name she had dropped. She was simply trying to boast about her newfound fame by association, but since she could not say that directly, she accused Lady C of name-calling instead. After all, the writer had labeled herself, admitting to being drunk over those weekends. Lady C viewed this behavior as typical of a certain class of journalists, a group she noted her host did not belong to. As we all know, there are many reporters who will gladly scrape the bottom of any barrel to suit their own agendas. She was clearly one of them. Furthermore, she possessed a long track record of publishing highly favorable stories about Harry and Meghan, which made her entire stance highly questionable. To brand Lady C a sensationalist was equally absurd. Having penned nearly 15 books throughout her career, she considered herself first and foremost a dedicated, established author. Indeed, viewers of her show constantly praised her for being the exact opposite of sensational, noting that she always maintained a highly measured, thoughtful perspective. For Charlotte Griffiths to insult her in this manner was an attempt to erase her literary achievements and drag her down to the level of a mere commentator with no other credentials. She found the comparison utterly ludicrous, likening the writer's comments to a completely meaningless debate over hair color. As her friend pointed out, the woman was clearly trying to promote herself by riding on the coattails of Lady C's famous name. Ultimately, the entire situation was deemed completely laughable. Continuing, the host wanted to explore the massive impact of this verdict on Prince Harry, especially since Lady C had previously shared her own dramatic legal battle against the Daily Mail. Let's follow them over to Substack to continue the conversation, where it was recently revealed that Prince Harry actually tried to settle his case. It seemed the prince knew, before even entering the courtroom, that he was on a fool's errand. Fortunately, Lady C understood the complexities of suing major newspapers and why everything had gone so terribly wrong for Harry. They promised to dive into those fascinating details as the Royal Uncensored aftershow continued. Viewers were invited to follow the rest of the conversation by visiting the Substack platform at www.outspoken.live. With the UK government attempting to ban independent creators, many faced being completely erased from the YouTube algorithm. Because of this, independent support was crucial to keep Outspoken alive. The single best way to bypass the algorithm was by subscribing to their Substack. While signing up was completely free, paid subscribers received exclusive first access to the aftershow. Located at www.outspoken.live, the channel remained a bias-free, uncensored haven for independent news. Operating without big tech backing or billionaire puppet masters, the platform relied entirely on the support of its audience. Audiences were urged to subscribe on YouTube, enable notifications, and follow Dan Wooten Outspoken on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribing cost nothing, yet it allowed the show to continue fighting tirelessly for the truth.